desperate for hope that recovery from your eating disorder is possible? Do you feel afraid, ashamed, alone, or misunderstood? Or maybe you know someone struggling, but you don't know how to help. Friend, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Recover with God podcast, where you'll hear stories of recovery, personal and professional advice, and hope that only comes from God. You are not alone. You are understood. And God is here right now to walk this journey with you. Hi, friend. It's Jamie, host of the Recover with God podcast, and I am so happy you pushed play on this episode today. You are about to hear a powerful story and words of wisdom from my guest, Tori Peyton. Tori is a blogger, author, fellow believer, and ED survivor. She started Grow with Tori, the name of her Instagram and TikTok accounts, plus her blog, and spreads encouragement to others who are struggling with an eating disorder and mental health. Tori's daily inspiration and honesty about her own journey is refreshing and really approachable. After following Tori on Instagram personally for a while, I had to reach out and ask her to be on this podcast, and I'm so grateful she said yes. Hey, Tori, thanks for being here today to share your story.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me. And honestly, that bio almost made me tear up a little bit when you were saying that, because I just never thought I could impact anyone with my journey. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think I feel the same. I mean, being here, both of us talking and knowing that we, had struggled with eating disorders and we're recovered and, just saved by the grace of God. It's so cool just to see how God is using it now and in a completely different way than maybe we expected. So absolutely thrilled to have this conversation. And I will start off by asking my zeal question, which I ask every guest on the podcast, because zeal is my favorite word. And that probably did stem from my recovery, because after I recovered, I realized every day's a gift and life is such a gift. And I just want to live it to the fullest. So my definition of zeal is living with a passionate pursuit of a purpose. So, Tori, I'd love to hear what living with zeal looks like in your life right now.
I think for me, living with zeal is honestly just giving my best every day and not judging what it is for that day. I think in the past, I focused so much on being the perfectionist and being 100% every single day. And so for me, it's truly just meeting myself where I am and that being enough.
Wow, that is a powerful answer because it's so true. You can't live with zeal if you're kind of beating yourself up over, what you're doing and not just like being okay and content with who you are. Like contentment with that. That's a great answer. That's the thing I love about this question, which I wasn't expecting, is that every single answer has been so different. And you think with like giving my definition of zeal with that question, like maybe I would get similar answers, but I feel like every single person has had a different perspective on it, and I love that. So thank you.
Oh yeah,
And
and I love that too. I think it shows too, and that's a beautiful thing about recovery as well, is just there are so many different perspectives on things
Mhm.
and people define things so differently. And I think that's a really cool part of recovery and life, just realizing that I don't know, these words can have an impact differently for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we all have the dictionary, right? But I still think you can interpret things differently, or how you apply it to your life can always look different. And even in different seasons, I could ask you, or I could ask myself that same question next year and have a different answer
Yeah.
potentially based on like just where you're at. So it's neat to just even to see the progress that you made and in answering questions like that too and reevaluating. So yeah. Very cool. And now I'd love to invite you to share your story, whatever God put on your heart to share today.
Yeah, so when I tell my story about my eating disorder, I typically start in college, because I developed it at age 19 after I quit my sport, which was volleyball. But honestly, I was doing some reflecting, and the stage of recovery that I'm in right now is just so much deeper than the surface level, which was my eating disorder behaviors.
Mhm.
My true struggle with mental health did start at age 7 when I was sexually assaulted. Um, it, I remember the moment, when I went to the hospital, because was so overwhelmed and didn't understand what was happening. And so my parents genuinely didn't know what to do. I was like having a panic attack. And I remember the moment that my OCD and overwhelming thoughts started. I was sitting in the hospital bed and I was just had these intrusive thoughts about people hurting me. And since then, my biggest fear has been hurting other people. Um, and so I think just from that moment, I had a really complicated relationship with myself and with my body. I had this core belief that I am bad, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And so over the next, 10 years, I think that really kind of shifted in different ways. I struggled with PTSD, anxiety, depression, OCD, and then finally, once I quit my sport, an eating disorder, which was obviously a more physical manifestation because I struggled with anorexia. I ended up, losing a lot of weight, restricting my food and things like that. But really, I think what I'm learning now in recovery, having struggled with, wow, now it's been 7 years since it all began. Now that I'm 26, is I'm just realizing it's so much deeper. Um, and that is why I started off the story when I was 7. And it isn't just, that I struggled with these eating disorder behaviors, because there were many. There was binging and purging and restriction and overexercise. I've truly done it all. But that core of it was just like not feeling safe and not feeling good enough. And so that's the stage of my recovery that I'm at this moment. And that's why I created Grow with Tori too, is just because I promised myself, like, if I finally chose recovery, I was going to share my story. Like, I just had to. I had to help other people. I didn't go through this to not share it with other people. So that was a long story short of kind of how I got to where I am now. And sorry if you hear my dog in the background. He's always with me.
That's okay. Pets are welcome on the podcast too. I try to keep my dog away, or he would be interrupting way too much. But all good. And no, thank you for sharing so deeply, kind of, even from the beginning where it started. And I think that's something is really important to mention because with eating disorders, they can obviously start from many different reasons, for many different reasons, and many different things that may have happened in the past or even at the time when your eating disorder starts. And so just knowing like you went through trauma and then, you struggled with a lot of other things before the eating disorder manifested, like that's important because I think for anyone listening right now, if you just are struggling with something other than an eating disorder too and don't really understand how to process it, like um and it's really helpful to know that maybe the eating disorder wasn't the first thing that you started struggling with. There's obviously some deeper things involved. And I have to give a quick shout out. So my sister plays volleyball. She's actually a college volleyball coach.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
in
That's so
Michigan.
cool.
So yeah, so I just volleyball's dear to my heart just because of my sister being a coach, and I'm just really a proud sister. So but I totally understand just from being like near her and in that world how even like with sports too, it's interesting to see how you said that's kind of when you're started after
Mhm.
you gave up sports. Do you think that, or why do you think that is? Why do you think that quitting volleyball kind of threw you into your eating disorder?
I think that when you are an athlete and you are constantly exercising, constantly, quote unquote, burning calories,
Yeah.
you have this thought that, what you eat doesn't really matter because you're burning it all off. I don't think that's a really healthy way of thinking it, but I think that's a big way that a lot of athletes think about it. And so when I quit my sport, I just had this awareness that I'm not in practice for 3 hours a day. I'm not burning, X amount of calories every day. What does that mean? Like, do I still eat the same amount? Do I not? Um, like, what category am I in? I identified for so long by one thing, and that
Mm.
one thing was an athlete. And I had a very clear picture of what an athlete was allowed to look like. So now that I wasn't an athlete, was I supposed to have a sorority girl's body? And what was that? What did that look like? What did I see on Instagram? And so I think I just tried to find a box that I fit in and I couldn't find one. And so I decided mine was going to be the fit skinny girl. That's just what I thought was worthy at that time in my life. Um, because to be honest, a lot of the messaging that I was finding on social media was that that is what was worthy and that is what a college girl was supposed to look like. And so I want to acknowledge that pressure that I think college athletes for sure, but college girls in general have. And it's a place to this day that I think is a really vulnerable place to be in is college. And my heart truly goes out to every single girl who is in college because it's really tough and the pressures are really, really hard.
It's so true. For me, college was a lot longer ago, but I know the same pressure. I remember so well how that felt and how you do. You look at the people who fit that mold, right? The girls who are skinny and fit, and it does seem like they either get more attention or they just have a life that seems happier in some ways. And I don't know about you, but for me, like, I grew up, I've always been pretty shy. And so I kind of thought having like a skinnier body that got more attention would take away the shyness or it would overcome it somehow. So that way I wouldn't have to worry about not being outgoing because people would still notice me in a different way. And I think there's just, yeah, like you said, there's so much danger in that. And it's very unfortunate that we feel that way. And it can be beyond college too. I mean, if you're listening now and you think, well, gosh, I'm not in college anymore, but I still feel that pressure. I still feel, or maybe you're in high school, maybe you're not in college yet, and you're feeling that pressure. Like it can happen at any time. Like there are always going to be those comparison traps out there that can make you feel less than. And so I appreciate you calling that out because I think that I hope anyone listening now will understand and hear us say that that's not real. That's not true. That doesn't define who you are, like um your identity and who God made us to be. He didn't have a specific body type in mind for us to look like, and that is not what makes you worthy. That is not what makes people want to talk to you or be your friend or like you. And I don't, and for me, when I did look that way, I was miserable inside. People may have looked at me on the outside and thought, wow, she's got everything. She's got it all together. She looks amazing. And on the inside, I was a mess. It was a nightmare. I was not happy. And so, not to say that everyone who you look at and maybe idolize or compare yourself to feels that way inside, but some people do. And so wanting that life isn't going to change anything for you.
Yeah, that's really well said. I completely agree.
Yeah. Was there a turning point after you'd been struggling for a while in college and out of college when you just decided I'm ready to recover. I'm done with this.
Yeah, I that's such a good question. And I try to pinpoint, like I remember specifically I'd been struggling for probably 3 or 4 years. And I was like, you know what? I want to recover, but I don't really want to gain weight. And so, which is not a great way to go into recovery because, if you're anorexic and you're pretty underweight, you're probably going to have to gain weight to be healthy again.
Yeah.
And so I remember, saying, I'm going to get a therapist, I'm going to get a dietitian. And I did. I got one virtually. And for a year, I was basically continuing to engage in eating disorder behaviors, meeting with this team, but not really seeing any progress. If anything, I think it just got worse. I got to, the lowest weight I'd ever been, the unhealthiest I'd ever been mentally and physically. And so 5 years then after I developed my eating disorder, I just remember having a mental breakdown. I had just finished, and trigger warning, binging and purging, which was pretty typical for me because I was diagnosed with anorexia binge purge disorder. Um, and I remember calling my mom and just saying, like, Mom, I just got to the point like where I don't want to live anymore. I don't want to keep going. I actually self-harmed for the first time and last time that night. And I just kind of made a promise to myself that I was never going to get there again. I figured if I had to gain weight, it's better to actually enjoy my life and live my life and continue to keep living a little bit heavier than to end my life in this moment
Mm,
at a smaller body and a smaller size. Like, what was
yeah.
the point? And so, honestly, even to this day, when things get tough, when I literally want to give up and I'm just like, wow, I'm having a rough time, like, was this all worth it? I just go back to that girl and I'm like, okay, it was worth it. Like, she hated her life. Like, I could have tough days in recovery. I can have days when that voice is loud and tells me that I'm not good enough. But you know what? Like, nothing will be as bad as that moment when I truly didn't want to live anymore and I didn't want to keep going. Because I think that's what a lot of people don't acknowledge about eating disorders is it's not just being insecure about food in your body. It strips away like who you are, like who you're, like your identity. Like I truly
Hmm.
didn't have I didn't know what my purpose was. Like I didn't even recognize myself. I was like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'd say that's why.
That's such a great point for if you're listening now and maybe you're listening because you want to help someone you know who's struggling or maybe you're struggling now and hasn't quite hit you yet. Yes. Eating disorders totally wipe away your identity. They steal it. They make you kind of forget who you were before you had one. And yeah, same. When I recovered, I was asking, who am I without this? I did not know. I could not picture it. I had struggled for 10 years before I recovered. And so for me, it was very much like I lost a decade of my life not really knowing who I was. And so yeah, appreciate you bringing that up because it's such a it's such a loss and like part of recovery is figuring out who you are again and what your purpose is and what you love and what you enjoy and what makes you happy and what makes you want to live
Yeah.
because truly though I never did feel like I wanted to end my life, there were definitely moments when I struggled where I thought what's the point? Like I wasn't at the point of like I want this to end, but just kind of yeah, what's the point? What's the point of my life? This is all it is. This is all I have. And so, yes, it's really just life draining, life stripping away when you're struggling with this. Um, Now, I know on your Instagram account and in your blog, you talk about your relationship with God. So, what did that look like during your years of struggle?
I shouldn't be laughing, but I just like I'm just really grateful that God didn't give up on me, honestly.
Mhm.
That's the only thing I can say
Yeah.
is I had this feeling, like I just had this feeling the whole time. God is telling me like he is not first in my life. My eating
Mm.
disorder is. And I knew it. I actually had the calling in my heart to do social media like probably 5 years ago. And I thought it was going to be a fitness account, like a health
Okay.
and wellness, fitness, healthy eating, like that's what I wanted to
Mm.
do. And all my friends knew that's what I wanted to do. I just hadn't done it yet. And I just had this feeling. I was like, you know what? When I start that social media account, I know it's going to be successful. Like I knew. It's like almost like God put that in my heart, but I also knew that it wasn't going to be fitness. There was something about it that it just wasn't right. Fitness and healthy eating just it just wasn't right. And I remember specifically last year, which was the year I finally chose recovery, at the beginning of the year, I told myself, you know, I'm going to finally start that fitness and healthy eating account because even though I feel like God's telling me no, I want to do it, I'm going to do it. I have a mental breakdown. I start filming content. I have a mental breakdown. This is when all this happened, where I basically was crippled in my eating disorder, the lowest weight, super unhealthy, and I just couldn't handle it. Before I even posted a video or started the account, I was in a treatment facility
Mm.
because God literally told me, I've told you that the eating disorder is first in your life and that this is not your path. Here you go. Like you have to get better. And so it's just the past year has been a lot of me just trying to reconnect with God honestly and really explore what does it mean to trust him? What does it mean to put him first in my life and to have just conversations with him?
Mm.
Because for so long I felt so ashamed and just wanted to avoid him. And so now even though, you know, sometimes that shame is still there, I just try to be way more open-hearted and just like God use me. Like I have hope that I didn't have before. Like that's one thing too, is like recovery. The great thing about it is like I know I'm doing my best. Like I
Hmm.
know I have hope. I know that I
Yes.
can trust in God. Whereas before I was hopeless. Like I literally didn't have anything to hope for. So even choosing that recovery, and I just want to encourage anyone listening, like even that first step of saying, God, I am freaking terrified and I don't want to do this, but I have hope that somehow you're going to make it better and it's going to work out. Like that truly will change your life. Like hope changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's same. That's why my Instagram account is called Hope in the Girl because I feel you on that very much. And what you described, your shame and not wanting to go to God before you recovered during your struggle, and then now working to repair that relationship and go to him with that open heart and to just say what's on your mind and just bring whatever you're feeling to him. That is the heart of this whole podcast. Like you said it so well, of just why I called it Recover with God and my heart behind it to show anyone struggling that you don't have to wait until you recover to go to God. You don't have to wait until you think you're good enough for him to be there and listen to you. And you don't have to feel shame that like if you're still struggling and you're trying to pray or read your Bible, don't think you're a hypocrite. Don't think that, oh, he's not really going to listen to me because I'm putting something before him, like you said, or like making something an idol or sinning. He's there the whole time. He wants you to be going to him in your mess, in all of it, because that's grace. That is hope. That's who God is. He's not waiting for us to be good enough. So I just love the way you said that. So yeah, that's exactly what this podcast is about and why I knew that I needed your story on this episode. So um thank you for sharing just about your heart and your relationship with God and even just how it's going now too. And it's a process, right? I mean, our relationships with God are probably the rest of our lives are going to be a little up and down and just daily trusting him, retrusting him. It's a choice every single day to rely on him and to go to him. It's not like, oh, I did it once, now we're good, God. Like I'm better. I don't really need you tomorrow. No, we need him every day. So it's just a learning process and he wants us to learn and grow with him. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's ever evolving, right? Like
oh yeah.
I just always try to remind myself it is a relationship. I think there's a big difference between being a Christian, being part of the Christian church, and being a follower of Jesus. Like
Hmm.
I don't want to just follow a religion. Like I truly
Yeah.
want a relationship, and relationships ebb and flow and they change, and that's okay. And you're not going
Yeah.
to feel great, and you're probably going to project a lot of stuff onto God that aren't isn't
Hmm.
true of him, and that's okay because he can handle it and he's not going to change just because your opinions of him do.
Hmm. Yeah, it always just makes me think of the prodigal son and that story. If anyone's not familiar, it's in Luke chapter 13, or sorry, 15. But just the fact that, it doesn't matter what we do, we can run away from him. We can spend years away from him. We can do things that are almost like a slap in the face to God, really. And he doesn't turn away. He doesn't say, "Okay, I'm done with you." He's still just there, and he'll take anything. And the other thing is, I love in the Psalms when you read some of King David's Psalms, he was just really honest with God. He just kind of said what he was feeling, and it's neat to just see the progression of his prayers in Psalms too, where he might have started out by saying like, "I'm scared," or "I don't like this," or "Are you going to save me, God?" But then in the end, he always kind of comes back to like, "But I trust you." And and so just working out those conversations with God, you might go to God in the moment and think, "What are you doing, God?" Or "Where are you?" Or "I don't feel you," or "I'm I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm angry," whatever your emotion is. And if you just keep talking to God, take the emotions to him, eventually in the end, he will show up. And I promise you, if you just keep talking to him, you'll end up feeling that. You'll end up feeling, you know what? You're there. I trust you. Just like David. So yeah, I think it's great to point out, and it'll ebb and flow. And even in different seasons of life, it can change. And whether that's with an eating disorder or not, you just be going through something with friends or family or your job or school or just there's just so many things in life that are going to come up and challenge you in different ways. And God is there through all of it. Now I also would love to hear you talk about truth versus lies. I know you've shared a lot of this on Instagram as well, and I just think it's so important to talk about. So why do you think it's important to focus on God's truth in recovery and kind of what has helped you when the lies have creeped in?
Yeah, honestly, this is a really good reminder for me too, because I think lately I've just been struggling with listening to some of the lies and negativity a little bit more
Hmm.
and not, leaning into that truth. So I think this is going to be such a good reminder for me. I I started off just thinking about the truth versus lies because, you know, it says in the Bible, like, your word is truth. Like, scriptures are true. I always try to go back, like, the eating disorder, all it does is lie. Like it
Yeah.
manipulates reality, right? And so I needed something that was grounding me that I knew to be true. And the
Mm.
Bible is true. Like if I have my faith and trust in the Bible, I can know that that's reality. And
Yes.
so much of what I did in recovery and what I want to continue doing is memorizing Bible verses which are truth to replace those lies that sometimes it's the enemy putting in our heads. Sometimes it's the broken parts of us that were hurt from trauma that they're
Yeah.
putting those negative thoughts in our head. And so, whenever I have those lies, I try to replace them with God's truth. And an example is literally I used to put sticky notes on my mirror of just saying like, you're beautifully and wonderfully made. Whenever that
Mm.
lie of you look horrible today or you're not good enough, like God says that like he hand knitted you in your mom's womb. Like there's just so much grace and truth and love. And I think if we focus more on that, as humans, we're so hardwired to focus on the negative. And
Mhm.
and rightly so, right? It's a survival mechanism. And so
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to acknowledge that just because we've been hardwired that way doesn't mean it's the right way to look
Mm.
at things. Like we don't have to have like negative things don't have to have as much power as positive ones.
Mm.
And I think because we feel them so intensely, those negative feelings and thoughts and emotions, that they can feel true, but like they're not. And so that's what I try to tell myself is like, this is true. And if I have to repeat it to myself 100 times to combat that negative thought, like I will. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that was a good reminder for me too. Like, man, memorizing scripture for just different moments of your life can be so helpful. Or even remembering, like, and I want a tattoo of this of God is good. When things suck, when you feel like things aren't going the way that you want them to, when you're like, God, why am I in this situation? I don't understand. He's good. Like, that is one thing that you know is true always.
Always. Yeah. And scripture doesn't change. That's the beauty of it being truth. It's like ultimate truth and it's continual truth. It's not going to be true today, untrue tomorrow. And so going back to that constantly is so good. Yeah, the lies just do. They feel so real. They do feel true. And I remember when I chose recovery, like that first month, gosh, I was starting to work on like the truth versus lies for myself. And I was telling myself God's truth, even when I didn't believe it. Like I remember just like speaking truth over myself and like repeating it and thinking, I don't even think I'm at a point when I believe this. So this is God's truth and I'm saying it to myself. And I just had to keep saying it until I did believe it. And I think
Yeah.
that for anyone listening, like if you're like, I am speaking truth over myself and the lies are still just too loud, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it because the more whatever you hear the most of, you're probably going to lean toward and you're going to believe. So like if you're only hearing the lies and you're barely ever putting that truth into your mind, you're probably just going to keep leaning toward the lies. But if you just pour the truth in, even when you're like, I don't know, I'm not ready for this, like just keep doing it because that's the only way it's going to stick.
And I think too, something I've become really aware of is like a lot of those lies just pop up from my social media feed
Mm,
or from comparison. I
yeah.
love John Mark Comer, and he had this phenomenal quote that was like, the enemy is way less likely to, combat you through physical violence like he did in the Old Testament in the Bible.
Mm.
He's way more likely to combat you via a notification on your cell phone. And I was like, wow, you're not wrong. Like that gets so distracting. It just takes your mind completely away from your reality because that's
Yeah.
really what we should be focused on is like our life, our purpose. Like
Hmm.
not what is that other person doing? Like in no way is that going to serve you.
Yeah, I know in this age, that is where he gets us. Like our phone is, you just always have it with you. It's the easiest access to your mind and your, how you're feeling. It's right there. So why wouldn't the devil use what's on your phone, your notifications, your social media feed? I think just even being aware of that. It's not to say like, okay, we all have to just give up social media. And if that is something that you feel God's telling you to do, by all means. But I think that it's just that awareness, right? Of saying, if I choose to get on Instagram or whatever social media platform that I love being on and connecting with people on, I just have to be aware that as I'm scrolling, there may be messages that pop up that might affect me. And I have to decide in my heart and in my head how I'm going to respond to that.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, it starts with awareness. And then from there, you kind of just like create that plan of like your response and what you're going to do the next time it happens, and then keep building muscle, because like the first couple times you might be like, darn it, I let that get to me, but like if you just keep working at it, it's just like it's just like fitness, it's just like working out, like you will develop that muscle and maybe, or a reflex, however you want to look at it, to just be faster at and not letting it get in your head and seep into your mind and think it's true. We all just need to be aware what we're seeing in our feed. And then also just choosing to follow people who are going to put truth and life into your feed. So like follow Tori. I'm going to have her Instagram and TikTok handles in the show notes. So like just be conscious of like who you're following too. And if you see like the same person keeps posting things that you're like, man, that's a lie, that's not true, maybe unfollow, maybe mute them, whatever you need to do. Like you have a choice in that matter. Like you definitely have a choice in who you follow. So just be aware. I appreciate the things that you share on social because I feel like a lot of it's just so relatable in different ways to different people, whatever they happen to be struggling with. And OCD, I know, is something that you talk a lot about too. And there are definitely ways I think that OCD can affect people with food and body image and all of that. So do you have any practical tips for the listeners, anyone who might be navigating both OCD and food and body struggles?
Yeah, and this is honestly something I'm still currently navigating because I talk with my therapist and the typically with eating disorders and OCD, it's so intertwined, but the top layer is really addressing the ED behaviors. So I think we have to address that first, like making sure we are following meal plan, we are, fueling our bodies regularly, we're responding to those negative thoughts and not by not acting on them. And so I think if we can control, the behavior or the compulsion first. That's really like what we ideally want to do. But I think getting to the root of it is truly like learning, and I know this sounds crazy, but what I'm trying to do is learning to accept that the thoughts are there and they're just thoughts and they don't necessarily have meaning or value. It's the meaning and value that I'm attaching to them. And so this is called acceptance therapy. Just really accepting the fact that like the thoughts are allowed to be there and that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with you. That's so much of like managing the OCD for me. And then I think another thing too that's been really helpful is just like grounding and tuning into myself. I think this is helpful for like eating disorders and OCD, just because tuning into your authentic self can just kind of create distance from that OCD intrusive voice. And it can really tune into like help you tune into what are your values? Like what do you want to do? And how would you approach this situation? And so I think those two things are especially what helps me, but I think honestly, it's something, if I'm being completely transparent, that's the main thing I'm struggling with right now is the OCD piece. It's like I have done the ED stuff, I've done the weight gain and my fear foods. I truly have no fear foods anymore, and I'm so proud of myself for that. But there's still that voice, that OCD voice that comes in and says, you need to control everything. You need to control food. You need to control your body. You should be worried a bit about that and that and that. And man, does it get overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I think what I can say is don't zoom out too far. Take it one day at a time. This is advice I'm literally giving myself right now. You're you're spiraling a little bit. Like don't let it spiral you. Don't think, a year from now, a month from now, none of that's going to serve you. OCD wants you to think about those things because that's going to help you gain control in the moment. And that's what it wants, is it just wants control. And so I think if you can just let the future tripping stop and truly ground yourself in the present moment, focus on this minute, focus on the next minute, and just take it minute by minute and day by day. So that's that's kind of what I'm doing and praying through it because I
Mhm.
truly believe that God fights for us and with us, and he fights offensively and he also fights defensively. He's fighting with us, but he's also protecting us. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I'll literally pray, and of course I believe in the power of prayer. So I'll pray like, God, take away the thoughts today. I'm going to be fighting myself and I'm going to be working hard myself, but some days I just need you to help me. And so, yeah, that really helps me a lot.
I like that one of your practical tips is prayer because that's so good. I think just taking everything to God and the fact that yes, he does fight for us, but he wants us there as well. Like we're part of that fight. And there are things that we will have to do and we will have to face as he's fighting for us. Like we're still going to be in it, but prayer is so powerful. It's so so powerful and God gives us that as a tool. Like that is why Jesus died on the cross so that we have direct access to God and we can speak to him and through the Holy Spirit we can hear from him and learn from him and grow. And so I just love that advice and you touched on fear foods, so I do want you to also share some tips on that as well and how you've approached it and what's worked for you.
Yeah, so fear foods. This is actually a topic that I really love because I just feel so much gratitude for God and for myself for like truly like hitting this home. Like I was like, that's one of the first things I want to do in recovery. I really want to challenge my fear foods. Like I was ready for a challenge. Maybe it was the athlete inside of me. But I basically approached it like this. So I made a list of my highest feared, medium feared, and lowest feared foods. And I would just kind of day by day or week by week set challenges for myself of like, I'm going to challenge this easier food this week and see how it goes. And I might not finish the food, but that's okay. Like, I'm just going to at least try it because I just want to acknowledge like fear foods, they're complicated and they're different for
Yeah.
everyone. Like, it's not one food that everyone fears. Like,
Hmm.
there's typical trends of like sweets or high carb or high fat that some people fear, but like it is very person dependent. And so for me, I think it really just was breaking up that big, massive fear of foods and categorizing it and making it smaller. A lot of recovery is just like zooming in, like it seems like a huge feat when you just say like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared of so many things.
Hmm.
Just it day by day, truly. Like it's the little wins. And I don't know who said this, but I love that quote that it's really the little wins that make a big change. It's
Yeah.
nothing crazy that makes change. It's just those little day by day progressions.
Yeah. And not feeling like, oh, I have to face all of my fear foods at once. I love that you made a list. And so, yeah, I love that you talk about just breaking it down into manageable bites, no pun intended, but taking, that one bite of something when maybe before that would have sent you into a spiral, just eating one bite. You don't have to eat the whole thing. And maybe the next time you have two bites and go from there. And just yeah, those baby steps, those small steps of progress, and that is really where it is. There's no pressure to do anything, cold turkey or
Wow.
You have to recover all in one day. It is such a process. And if it feels like a process, if it feels hard, if it feels like, wow, I was hoping I'd choose recovery and then I'd be recovered. No, that's not how it works, and you're not failing if that's how it's going for you. That's exactly where you're supposed to be, is figuring out like what's the next step I can take. And I also really appreciate how you said, I don't think I can handle like my top fear food. Today I can only do the smallest one, the one that's just kind of scary. Whatever it is, whichever one you decide to face, that's progress. It's all progress. So yeah, I just like the way you approach that. And I think, and having flexibility with it too, not being rigid and and saying, well, I've got this list, I've got to start from the bottom or I've got to start from the top. And if I don't do it in order, then just like, which one can I do today? What can I do today? Or maybe you faced a fear food and it was scary. And I know like for me, like some of mine were like peanut butter was one. And
Peanut butter
like
is a really big one. Peanut butter is a really big one.
yeah, and also just egg yolks, like eating the whole egg was really hard for me.
Yeah.
And so, maybe like I faced that fear. I ate a whole egg, a whole scrambled egg, and it still felt scary. So like doing it again, what? I just need to do that again. Like I faced it, nothing bad happened to me, but like I'm just gonna do it again. And that's still progress too, of just like saying, okay, it's getting easier. I'm getting used to it a little bit more than I did the first time. So you may have to face them a couple times, and that's okay too. So
And I think too, like, I just want to encourage people, if you haven't had a fear food in a while and you think about it and you're like, wow, it kind of feels scary again, like that's okay and that's normal. I know even the other day, one of the first fear foods that I faced was bagels. And the other day, and I've actually faced it quite a few times. I mean, I think I had weeks on weeks where I was like, I'm going to eat a bagel for breakfast every day because I was feeling super empowered. You definitely don't have to do that. But it had been a couple months since I had had a bagel, which wasn't like intentional. I just didn't really have them.
yeah.
And I was like, wow, bagels kind of sound like a little scary.
Hmm.
And I was talking about it with my dietitian, and I was like, I think I need to have a bagel this week. And so it's just like, it's okay. Like, I always try to take a step back. The enemy and the eating disorder, they want you to feel shame about that. They want you to
Yep.
feel horrible about yourself that you can't handle the bagel this week or something like that. But there's no shame. It's a learning experience. You're trying to figure out, like, okay, I wonder why I'm scared of it now. And you know
Mhm.
what? This is a good learning opportunity. Like, let me try it again. And so I think just like sometimes too, taking a step back and really giving yourself the grace that like God has already given you. Because sometimes we don't do that. We're like, oh, God has given us so much grace, but we don't give it to ourselves.
I know.
Like, it's okay. Like, it's
Hmm.
okay to struggle and it's okay to still be learning and growing, no matter
Yeah.
where you're at in recovery. Even if you're 5 years down the road and you're like, wow, I'm scared of a bagel this week. That's okay. There's no
Yeah.
timeline.
I know. Well, and I just think, you realizing, hey, I might be scared of bagels again. That's progress. Instead of thinking, oh man, I'm failing because I'm scared of bagels again. You're like, wait, I think I am. I should taste this again. You like were very proactive in that sense instead of being like, oh no, I'm not gonna go there. So I think even just if you're acknowledging like this kind of feels scary again, this might be something I need to work on again. That's major progress because like past you wouldn't have done that. Past you would have been like, okay, never eating a bagel again. We're done. Like I guess that one's not going to work for me. So I think that's just really great to acknowledge too. And it's gonna, like you said, it's earlier, it's going to be different for everyone. Maybe
Yeah.
you're listening and you're like, I don't struggle with bagels. I don't struggle with peanut butter. I don't struggle with eggs. You are going to have a completely different food or multiple foods that you'll end up wanting to face. And it could even be, I know for some people, and I think me included too, it's like maybe it's not so much for food, it's like the time of day you eat, or like there's just so many different things that can be fearful when it comes to eating of like, I have to eat breakfast at a certain time, or I have to eat, certain meals at a certain time, or whatever that is for you, like whatever you need to face, just kind of evaluate yourself. And I like that you said just kind of ask why, get a little curious and introspective, because that can teach you a lot about who you are and kind of like what's going on inside.
Yeah.
So overall, I know we kind of touched on just feeling that, there were times in your life, and I know in my life too, where you just feel like this feels impossible, or like I just don't know how I'm gonna live without my eating disorder. What would you say to the person who maybe feels like this is impossible? I'm never gonna recover. I don't think I can choose this.
I think I think honestly what I would say is, and it's interesting that I'm about to say this, but I'm kind of happy that this is my answer, is that's a narrative that you're telling yourself, and you're
Mm,
giving a lot of weight to a really negative narrative. Like, what if you gave just as much weight to recovery is possible?
mm,
I can do this. And previously, like, I would have just, I think, said, like, oh, like, I know it's really hard, but you can do it. But I think I'm just in this stage of my life and in recovery where I'm really like, every thought is kind of like either a positive or a negative one. Like there's typical, it's not black and white thinking, of course, but
mm,
there's many ways to view, your situation, and you can either approach every day saying, I'm going to have a great day, or you can approach every day saying this is going to suck and I'm going to struggle. And I've noticed personally, when I go into my days thinking I can do this, things are going to be okay, this is possible, when I approach my days with that hope and with trust in myself and trust in God, I have a better day.
mm.
And I realize it's not that easy. I want to be completely transparent and share that, like, I'm on an anxiety medication. I won't be on one for the rest of my life, but it's what I need temporarily. And that helps me a lot. But having that perspective and shifting the narrative and believing in yourself is so important. Believe in yourself more than you believe in the eating disorder. You give it so much power. You tell yourself that it can do so much and it has so much control over you. But what about you? Why aren't you doing that for yourself?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because it's like we almost treat it like it's a person, or like it has this power, and yes, it can feel really powerful, but you can overpower it. Like God can overpower it. Like it's really not that strong. Like when you break it down. I love your answer, and I love that, you were surprised by it, but also like happy that that's
Yeah.
how you're progressing to the point where you can say that. I think, it's just amazing to see that growth. Now, for anyone listening who might be a friend or a family member of someone struggling, what would you say, or what would you say to them in terms of how they can help?
I think the first thing is I always try to say, like, this is a mental illness, not a physical one. So, one of the
Mhm.
best things that you can do is just please keep weight out of it. Like, don't comment on appearances. Don't, even if it's what you think is a positive appearance, comment and you say, wow, you look so much healthier. I promise you, the person struggling with an eating disorder is not taking that as a positive comment. So just keep weight out of it. It truly is a mental illness. And I say that as someone who has struggled in a smaller body and who has struggled in a bigger body. And both of those are valid. And so I think just knowing first and foremost, it's a mental illness. And then the second thing is just honestly being able to listen and to kind of ask people, like, if your friend or family member who has an eating disorder comes to you, I would ask them, like, what do you need in this moment for me? Like, my husband used to not be able to support me at all. He would try to fix me, and it's just not a fix it situation. And so I communicated to him, like, hey, I really just need you to ask me, like, what do you need from me? Do you need me to vent, or do you want advice, or do you want me to, try to fix it or whatever it is? And so or do you want additional help and support? Because again, they can't fix it. So I think that's kind of what I would do is ask the person struggling when they come to you, what do you need from me? Like, do you need additional help or support that I can help you get? Or do you need advice? Or do you just need me to sit here and listen? Because I can do that too. And so just kind of just, yeah, I think being there, I think at the end of the day, just having someone to understand and not judge you is like all that anyone in recovery really wants.
Yes. Yeah, no judgment. I think that's very scary to feel vulnerable with someone and be afraid that you'll be judged. And spoiler for anyone listening, next episode will be with my sisters. And that'll be the final episode of the season. And I was just literally just recording it last night with them, and we were talking about listening. And one of my sisters, you'll hear this, but I'll give you a teaser. She was saying, I feel like when I was just listening to you, that I was enabling you. I was like, no, 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 no. Like when you were just listening to me, you were just letting me be myself and letting me share freely and not feel judged. And that actually really helped me. And she had no idea, even all these years later, like she did not know that was something that really helped me. She thought she was like enabling me because she wasn't trying to give me advice or fix something or help me. But that's what I needed in that moment was her just to listen. And so don't feel like, yeah, if you're just listening, that's not enough, or that's somehow validating what the person you know who's struggling is doing because you're not necessarily telling them like stop, don't do that. You're not giving them advice. That's not validating it. That's just really making them feel heard and seen and loved.
Yeah. And I think too, I always try to point people, like if you have really detailed, specific questions, I think Feast is a really good resource. If you
Okay.
Google Feast, FEAST, it's all caps. I don't know what it stands for, but I think it's like family of people struggling with eating disorders, basically.
Okay.
And they have a blog, they have resources, they have talking points. Like it's really great. And so I try to share that with as many people as possible too.
Okay, I'm definitely going to link that in the show notes. Thank you. I did not know that existed. So look in the show notes for that if you didn't have a chance to write it down, if you're driving, whatever. It'll be there. Thanks, Tori, for sharing that. Very good place to go get resources. Um, and then is there anything else you would say? I know you touched on like things that are not helpful to say to someone with an eating disorder in terms of like not talking about weight. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Um, Yeah, I think a big piece of it truly is the fix it mentality, or just eat. You know, that's not going to do
Mm,
anything. Just eating
only
isn't.
it were that simple.
Yeah, any comments about food, really? I just truly want
Mm,
to emphasize, I know it's so easy to think that eating disorders have to do with food and
mhm.
with your body. But that is a symptom of like such a deeper mental
Right.
struggle that the person's going through. You might see them restricting their food or going to the bathroom or whatever it is, but that's not really what they're struggling with at the core. And so I think just checking in on the person and how they're doing and like truly getting support for them and avoiding all food related convo can be the most helpful in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I also, unless you are a professional with like a dietitian or something, like talking about food, like you're not an expert at that anyway. So like, telling someone else what to eat when you're not qualified, you may not be giving them the right advice anyway. Just in general, food topics, it's not that simple. And that is another thing I was talking about with one of my other sisters. Just like I had no idea. I was just like, why don't you just eat this ice cream? Like it wasn't that easy. And at the time she didn't realize, yeah, it was so much deeper than just the food. Now I'd like you to share any final thoughts you might have that maybe we didn't touch on, if there's anything else, and also just how the listeners can connect with you.
Yeah, I guess my parting words will be like truly just like believe in yourself. Recovery, and I know that sounds really cliche, but recovery from an eating disorder or from a mental health illness, again, it's not really about the food. It's not really about your body. It's about like being okay with yourself and rebuilding that relationship with yourself. It got broken and that's okay. And you're probably going to have to heal a lot and do a lot of work, but I promise like things will be okay. You will feel safe again. You will love yourself again. And it's going to take time and it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. But just trust in yourself, like that you can do it. And for all the Christians out there, like trust God and bring him into it too. Like he is way stronger than any circumstance you're going through. And even if it doesn't feel like he's there, like even if it doesn't feel like he's working for your good, he is. Like
Yes.
He is always good. And so, yeah, I think that's like my closing things that I just want to emphasize to people. You can always connect with me at Grow with Tori on Instagram, Grow with Tori on TikTok if it's not banned soon.
Right?
Because
I know next year, right? We'll see what happens.
yeah, I'm much more an Instagram fan anyway, so
Yeah.
hit me up on Instagram. Yeah, I also have an eating disorder blog, growthtory.com, and I sell recovery journals on it as well, which you can find on
I
that
love that.
website.
Love that. Yeah. And all of that will be linked in the show notes. So you can find Tori. You can check out the journals if that's what you want to do. And I don't know if there's anything else that you're working on or anything else you might want to share that's maybe coming up. But feel free to share that too.
Yeah, honestly, I am in this period of going into 2024 thinking I was going to do so many things. I was going to finally be this, social media mental health advocate. I'm going to post a bunch of content and be super successful. And I think God's just telling me it's another season of growth. It's another season of stepping back, of truly figuring out who I am, what my purpose in this life is, and making sure that I'm really focusing on my relationship with him. And so I think that's valid.
Yeah.
I don't think I have to, and this is me talking to myself, I don't think I have to like accomplish things, and I don't think I have to do all the check mark things. And so I'm really focusing on being okay with where I'm at in the present and focusing on listening to God as much as I can. Yeah.
Yeah. That is so valid. And I think take, all the time that you need because as we talked about earlier, eating disorder takes so much away from you and finding out who you are again, what you love, what that purpose is, and God definitely speaks to us when we just give him that space, right? When we give him that time and we're not trying to just do the next thing. And you know what, if in that time that you give him he moves and says, okay, you know what, you're ready for this, or okay, I was just preparing you and I think you're prepared, happen too, right? I mean, but you're putting it in God's hands and you're saying, "Here I am. I'm willing to be patient and grow and learn in this season." We don't always know how long those seasons will last, right? We can have an
Yeah.
idea, but God's really the ultimate one who's going to share when the next season's going to start, right? And definitely for me, there was a season of after I recovered, a season of figuring out who I was and that looked very, very different than my current life. And I was single at the time, so I just like went off and did a lot of like solo travel and just different things to just figure out who I am and what does God want me to do. And that definitely prepared me for the next season, the next step. So I love that you're doing that. You're giving time with God, and I know He's going to bless you for it. And I know that it's going to be so fruitful. So if you're listening and you're kind of in a stage where, like I'm kind of in recovery or I'm approaching, a season of where I want to recover and I just kind of don't know what that looks like. It's still kind of messy. Just go to God, give him that time and see what he shows you, see what he tells you, see what you can do with the space that you give him. So I love that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it was just such a joy to talk to you, Tori, and hear your heart and your tips and your story and to see what God's doing in your life. Like that's the most exciting part and how he's growing you, and whether that's helping other people or just working on yourself, because both are important. So just yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for your heart.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey friend, I hope this conversation encouraged you today. And if it did, please let me know by rating and reviewing the Recover with God podcast wherever you are listening. Your feedback helps others find this podcast too. And click that follow button so you don't miss new episodes airing every Wednesday this season. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the links and additional resources we talked about today. And don't forget, whether you need help or you want to help, all help comes from